Hi everyone, welcome back. I am Timmy. I'm a tarot reader and a musician, and today we're going to do another tarot deck review. So we're going to do Tarot in Wonderland by Barbara Moore with illustrations by Eugene Smith. This is a great deck, especially if you like the world and the stories of Alice in Wonderland, if you're familiar with them, because it very closely, as you might guess, all follows kind of the arc and the characters from those books. I know it was one of my favorite series of books when I was a kid. I mean, even today, I actually just read them again not that long ago. They're fantastic. I've always just loved that world. So as you can imagine, the artwork is fantastic. And I think this is a good deck to start with if maybe you're a beginner and you're not used to or trying to get used to the system of tarot, because a lot of the cards are very easy to read because they're represented by characters that you already know, as opposed to like maybe having to get to know a new system. I know there's different opinions on that. Like a lot of people say start like with the Rider-Waite deck because that's the traditional deck, and that's usually, and I love that deck too. Don't get me wrong, I will be going through it probably soon, but I think everybody's different. Everyone learns a little bit differently. So if you maybe want to start with something that you're more familiar with, I think that would be kind of a good way to ease into it. So we will go through the major arcana as well as the 4 minor arcana suits, at least some of those. If you're new to tarot, again, I'll say that most decks, traditional decks, have 78 cards in them, 22 minor arcana cards that are kind of like the macro level, like the big picture stuff, and then 4 suits of minor arcana that go from ace through 10, and then a set of 4 court cards. So we'll go through those second. We will do with the major arcanas first. And remember, they go 0. There's 22 cards, but there's actually only 21 real numbers because the first one is 0. And that starts with the Fool. Okay, so here it is. And I think this is perfect. So right away you see what I'm talking about, where like the artwork completely represents this aspect of the story, right? The Fool is all about jumping into things head first, not really thinking about it, but I mean that's maybe some of the negative sides of the card, right? Like you're not thinking about things too much, but it's also good because she's very innocent, she's up for anything, and I think we could all use a little bit more of that. So that's the Fool. And then next we have the Magician, who's represented by our caterpillar, which is a very famous character if you've seen the movies or read the books. Here you can see he's surrounded not just by his smoking pipe that he's so famous for, but also the 4 elements, the 4 suits of the tarot, the pentacles, swords, wands, and cup, right? Magician is a master of manifestation. He can make things happen, but he needs to use the tools that he has at his disposal to do that. Next up is the High Priestess, right? Also manifestor, feminine energy coming from that one, but not necessarily female, right? Just that side of like intuitive and like natural manifestation. Next up is the Empress, who's represented by the very sweet White Queen, right? This is from Through the Looking Glass, and she's very soft. Again, a real feminine energy, that idea of taking care of yourself and others, being very indulgent, but not in a bad way, just like enjoying life and enjoying the world and being very drawn to like the physical earth. Again, yes, a feminine energy, but that doesn't mean it's female. Remember, if you are identify as male or non-binary and you pull the Empress, it does not mean like that you're female and that you can't relate to it if you're not. It just means like that kind of power. So we're talking about like the divine feminine, or like in the Emperor, the divine masculine, right? So we see the bird, who in the stories is like bossing everybody around and is very kind of like military. That's like some of these cards are very funny in the way they represent it, like those traditional archetypes. But remember, that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have goals and be organized and goal oriented and wanting to get things done, right? You just need to kind of like check yourself and making sure you're not forcing anybody into doing anything that they don't want to do, because everyone's their own person. Next we have the Hierophant, which is the Cheshire Cat, which I think is so perfect, right? Because literally in the books, if you're familiar with them, right, he's always kind of telling Alice, like, what's the next step? Where should she go next? This and that. So she's learning from him, but then he's always disappearing. So in my read of the Hierophant, it's always kind of like, yes, it's about like learning, and maybe you do have a great teacher, maybe you do, but a lot of the stuff, I mean, I think especially in Alice in Wonderland, it's like, is it coming from the Cheshire Cat or is it coming from herself, right? So be your own sense of authority. All right, here we have perfectly the King and Queen of Hearts as our lovers. I'll talk about some of these more than others. So next is number 7, the Chariot. And this scene is perfect. If you're familiar with the stories, this is when Alice is going to play croquet with the Queen of Hearts, and the game is like totally rigged. But Alice keeps trying no matter what. She keeps going forward. She keeps going for it. And that's, if you have goals and you want to get stuff done, embodying the Chariot and like that kind of energy is perfect, right? Because you just go for it and there's nothing standing in your way, even if maybe the rules aren't fair. Okay. Next is number 8, Strength. And remember, if you watch my other video, sometimes Strength is number 11, but in most decks, I think it's number 8. But just notice that. Like sometimes you'll see Justice as number 8 and Strength as 11. They're sometimes swapped. Anyways, a lot of times you see a lion on this card, but in this one you see her holding this beautiful fawn. Also, same thing, like a very caring, calming creature, right? Leading with strength and peace as opposed to like bowling through something. All right, next we have the Hermit, right? You see the knight riding away. He's the hermit in this situation. The Wheel of Fortune, which I think this is so perfect. Literally, she's running on a wheel, following the white rabbit, who started this whole thing, right, in the journey of Alice. If it weren't for the white rabbit, she probably never would have gone down that hole in the first place. And just like in the stories, she never knows what's going to happen, right? We never know. We never know what the universe has in store for us. So sometimes we have to kind of take our hands off the wheel for a second and just listen to the universe. All right, very appropriate. Here's number 11, Justice, with, again, the King and Queen of Hearts. This is a very, I don't want to say black and white, but it's a very clear-cut read of the idea of justice, right? Two completely opposite ends of the spectrum. Not necessarily the two best ends of the spectrum, but I think that the King and Queen of Hearts totally represent, in the stories of Alice, the extremes one way or the other. Okay, this one is definitely in this deck my favorite. Not necessarily, I do love this card. Not necessarily my favorite card ever, but one of my favorite cards, and I'm gonna stop talking. In this deck, definitely my favorite in the major arcanas. It's the Mad Hatter as the Hanged Man, or sometimes you'll hear it, the Hanged One. And I think this card specifically in this deck does a good job of showing, I don't want to say humor, but like, yeah, the lightness in it. The Hanged Man is all about seeing things from another perspective, and I would say the Mad Hatter definitely does that. He sees things like no one else. That's one of, like, the Hanged One or the Hanged Man is one of those cards that people can get very kind of like worried about, or like, oh, am I gonna feel super uncomfortable? Am I gonna, like, is something bad gonna happen? And my whole life's gonna be turned upside down? Not necessarily, right? No card is a good card and no card is a bad card. They're all good cards, right? They're all just telling us something. And it could be like, yeah, maybe it'll be a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe it will, but you'll grow from it. But it also might just be that, like, you need to look at things from a different angle and like reapproach something. So just remember that, like, all cards have different meanings. Just because maybe the imagery on some of them is scary doesn't mean that you have to be scared, or there's something like negative coming your way. And again, that's one of the things I love about this deck. I think it does a really good job of showing you that like the lightness in it, and like not to take things too seriously. I say perfectly as we come upon the Death card. And again, it's not scary. Remember, so death is transformation. It's moving on to something, like maybe you've done all you can with something and now it's time to move on to something else. It's shedding your skin. It's becoming something new, right? That's all it means. It does not mean you're going to die. It doesn't mean someone else is going to die. It just means that it's time to move on from something to something else. And this is perfect imagery for that, right? Because when Alice drinks or eats something in the stories, what happens? She literally transforms into something else. So it couldn't be more perfect. All right, next is along the similar imagery, or within the story anyways. Temperance. You see Alice with the two sides of the mushroom, right? One which will make her grow bigger, one which will make her grow smaller. And she's kind of just peaceful, thinking about what that means and what she might like to do, and just like weighing her options and trying to have an understanding of the situation. Okay, next we have, again, one of my favorite cards of all time in any deck. This is the Devil. Again, which I think gets like a very bad rap from people who think that like, oh, it means you're being chained down to something, or you have an addiction. And it could mean those things. It could. Any card can mean so many different things. But I think for me, I like to look at it in a more positive light, which is that like, okay, yes, maybe we have some patterns or habits or things that maybe we want to change, but the Devil card is like a call to recognize that and to say, okay, do I want to do, am I fine with this? Okay, fine, I don't need to do anything. Is it something I feel like I need to change? Okay, this is your call to change it. And this is obviously the Mad Hatter Tea Party scene. That's the March Hare and the Mad Hatter. And then Alice like stumbles in and gets like stuck there for a while. So it's perfect because what are they doing? They're caught in this cycle of constantly moving down one seat and they can't get out of it, right? So that card's a reminder of that. And what I say to anyone, whether it's a student, whether it's someone I'm reading for, whether it's myself when I'm reading for myself, is like the hardest thing about breaking a pattern or moving on from something is recognizing that is going on in the first place, right? So this card is saying, hello, hey, listen, right? This is going on. Is this okay? Do you want to do something about it? Do you want to change something? If so, this is just a reminder that you got to do that work. Okay. Next is the Tower, which this is a scene from, I believe, Through the Looking Glass, when Alice comes to the big feast at the end and everything is going wrong and the Red Queen is getting so mad. A lot of the times you'll see the Tower as like a building crumbling down or a tree or some kind of structure, but in this case it's an event, which I think is interesting. And it means the same thing, like, because in reality, when you have a tower moment, if something's going on, it won't necessarily be something so obvious as like there was a fire in your house or in your building or something like that. It might be something relating to how you relate to other people. So again, I think all these cards just give like a very interesting take on these things. We're almost done with the majors. This is the Star. And if this person doesn't look super familiar, it's because it's Alice's sister. And she is kind of just having a nice reflective moment looking in the pool, right? Very star energy, very calm, and just a sense of refreshing and renewal. Okay, and then we have the Moon, and we see the Walrus and the Carpenter. So especially if you've seen the original animated Disney film, this is in there. I think it's kind of appropriate for the Moon, right? Because the oysters are following the walrus and the carpenter, and they are going on this magical journey, right? Oysters aren't supposed to leave the sea, not usually, but they do, and but then it turns out to not be so great for them in the end, right? So it's just, again, not a scary card. It's just saying that the Moon it's all about that like magical journey for yourself. and some of it's going to be great and super refreshing, and you're going to learn, no matter what, you're going to learn so much. But you also kind of have to face your own like demons, and you have to think about those like subconscious things that might be bugging you, right? So that's the moon. And next we have Next we have the sun, which you see Alice and the White Queen and the Red Queen kind of like basking in this beautiful field of sunflowers. And I think this is a lot of the time you see like, I don't know, cherubs or always the sun, yes, like a big beautiful sun, but you don't really see the sun so much physically in here. It's more about the idea of that like light and that pride and royal feeling, right, coming off of them, the people, which I really, really like. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to do with, when I say royal, it doesn't have to do with like wealth or anything like that. It has to do with like how you feel about yourself. I think of the sun as like refreshing. Go stand outside, get some sun, feel good about who you are and where you are at this moment. It's a beautiful card. All right, then we have Judgment. You see the white rabbit up in the sky kind of making his call, and this is perfect for Judgment, right? What is Judgment? It's a call to something. It's an action oriented thing. It's saying, come, like, hey, I want your attention, right? And that's exactly what the white rabbit does for Alice. Her whole journey that she takes, she never would have even started it if it weren't for the white rabbit. Okay, and then number 21, the 22nd card, the World. So you just see Alice kind of finishing her journey and having learned something, right? She's gone through all of these adventures and she comes back a changed person. She absolutely does. That's kind of like her hero's journey. And we all have those throughout our lives. We have small journeys and that go from the Fool to the World anytime we begin something new. And then on the macro scale, our whole life is that, from like Fool when we're born all the way until the World, right? Okay, let's move on quickly to the minor arcana. Again, if you're not familiar, there are 4 suits: Pentacles, Cups, Wands, and Swords. All of them go from Ace through 10 and then have 4 court cards. In this deck, it is the traditional Page, Knight, Queen, and King. So it's a lot of cards, so we're not going to go through everything in every suit, but I will show you the Ace and then also the court cards. All right, so let's start with Pentacles. So Pentacles, it's just like a coin, right? In some decks you'll see it as like the suit of coins. And remember, really quickly, our major arcana are like big macro things, and then the minor arcana are maybe like more day-to-day things, kind of like the nitty-gritty. Any card can speak about any situation when you're pulling them, but that's usually what I think of. Like, I really like to see a minor if I'm like asking a question and say like, what should I think about when I'm trying to handle this situation? And then I'll pull a card, and usually the minors are like very helpful for that. So aces are always about like starting something, the beginnings of something. You can think about it like as ace, and ace is like a new moon planting seeds, and then like the 10 being full moon, things have come to fruition. All right, so pentacles are earthly related things, physical, anything in this physical world. A lot of people tend to think about it like, oh, it's money, and it can be about money, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So just remember that it can be anything in the physical world. So here's our Ace of Pentacles, and it's just like, right, starting your journey, planting a seed. Maybe you want to start your own business or something, or maybe you want to start a new project and you need to take that one first step to put it into action. And then I'll just show you our 4 court cards. So here's our Page. I'll try to hold them up for longer, I guess. And our Knight. And they are kind of hierarchical in that, like, Page is the less experienced one, and then as you go along, right, Knight's a little bit more experienced with and more of a master, and then as you go to Queen and King, you've reached, like, mastering that thing. Like, for example, I think that the Mad Hatter, he's in a lot of these cards, by the way. The Mad Hatter is perfect for the King of Pentacles because it's all about like being having dominion over the earthly realm, and he's all about like indulging in things and like having a good time and like really taking pleasure in what's here on earth. So that's perfect. All right, so that's Pentacles. And if I didn't say it already, Pentacles, right? Physical, earth. Yeah, earth is the element, obviously. Okay, let's do Cups next. Cups are feelings, emotion, intuition. The element is water, right? Very fluid. So a lot, like if you're pulling a lot of cups, thinking about like your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others. Self-love is super important with cups. So speaking of which, let's start with the Ace of Cups. Again, my apps, I know I'm like, I have so many favorite cards, but I do. This is my absolute favorite card, Ace of Cups. I've taken a lot of inspiration from it in my reading. For me, it's all about like self-love, like love yourself. What is good about you? What can you appreciate about yourself? Because it starts there. I know it's very cliche, but if you can't love yourself, how are you supposed to love someone else, right? It all starts with you. So this is the beginning of that journey. All right, and then we'll go to Page of Cups, right? Learn, like someone who knows something, someone who's doing something, but is maybe a little bit more of a novice. I don't think I mentioned this in the Pentacles, but for all of the suits, right, in our court cards tend to, people get confused about them all the time, they tend to represent a person. Usually you, unless in the spread that you're doing, it like specifically says it's supposed to represent someone else, it's representing you. So don't, again, just like Empress, Emperor, all that stuff, don't be worried about gender, because it's not gendered, right? It's just about what kind of thing they're representing. So there's our Knight of Cups, Queen of Cups, who is like a master of intuition and like empathy and is the perfect person to talk to. So sometimes you're like, if you're having trouble with someone or communicating with someone, maybe think about like, how can I be like the Queen of Cups? How can I be both giving and understanding, but also having boundaries and protecting myself, right? And then there's our a king. I almost said knight again. There's our King of Cups, right? And I think that the King of Hearts makes a lot of sense for that too, because he's like a softer sort of character, but still in charge. All right, let's move on to our wands. So wands are fire. That's the element. They represent like magic and manifestation. I love the wands. All right, so here's our ace. And right, ace is starting something. So maybe you have like a little spark of an idea and you're going to turn it into something. You're going to manifest something into the real world. And then we have our page. I'm going to try to go through these a little quicker. There's our Knight of Wands. A lot of people have trouble with the court cards because they usually are just people there. So you really have to think about like what they mean. Here's our Queen of Wands, who's like a fierce mama. And then King of Wands. Something that really helps me with the court cards is breaking it down, thinking about like those things that I'm saying at the beginning of each suit, like what do they mean? So if I get Queen of Cups, again, because we were just talking about it, if I get the Queen of Cups, I think, okay, cups, that is water, right? Each character of the court cards has like their own element also, if you want to think about it like that. So pages are very like earth energy. Knights tend to be like air. Queens are cups and kings are fire, right? That's the hierarchy. So if I were to pull Queen of Cups, I would think, okay, Queen, she's a water lady, right? Again, it's not gendered. I'm just saying that. But so water, and then cups is also water. So that's what I'm saying, like really intuitive, very in touch with her emotions and being able to understand other people's emotions. That really will help me kind of like, and then you can think about the mastery level, right? She's not a page, so she's not a novice, but she's not quite a king, which is like the highest, breaking those down will really, really help you, I think. It helped me when I was first learning to read. Okay. Swords. So swords are mental, thinking power, that kind of thing, like decision making, and they are represented by the element of air. Like that sound a sword makes in a movie. You can think about that if you ever forget the element. Ace of Swords, right? It's usually like, think about like metal striking a stone and creating a spark, right? It's literally giving you a brand new idea that maybe you've not thought about before, right? That's our Ace of Swords. And then really quickly our court cards. There's our page. Knight of Swords. This is a great one, a very fun one. It always reminds me kind of like of the Chariot. Knight of Swords is very much about like going for what you want, this kind of, and that kind of energy, kind of like bowling through no matter what, right? So every card has like positives and negatives. It's great to go for what you want, but it's not necessarily great to not be thinking about it, right? So we never want to embody just one card. Sometimes we'll work with just one card, but we want to be thinking about like, how can we have different aspects of different things? There's our Queen of Swords. Very, very fierce, like a protector. Like the swords are all very strong, smart people. So that's not a bad thing, right, to be embodying. And then there's Humpty Dumpty, which I don't know, if you haven't read the books, you wouldn't know necessarily that like Humpty Dumpty is a character in Alice in Wonderland, but he is. So there he is, standing high on his tower, looking over his realm. So again, it's like more about his mental strength. I think Humpty Dumpty is a good character to represent that because it's more about his mental strength than it is necessarily about like him physically being strong, right? Okay, great. So that's the deck. If you buy this deck, it's really great. You can get it kind of like anywhere. It's in a lot of stores, but you can also buy it online. This is one of the most in fact, I might say it's the best guidebook that I have to any of my decks by far. It is beautiful. You can see that from the art. Let me find a good one. Every single card, this is the majors and the minors, every single card has a full page picture of it, as well as two very in-depth sections. So if you're into an Alice in Wonderland and don't really read tarot so much, I would even recommend this because it has a section called Through the Looking Glass on every single card that tells you kind of what the story is behind what's going on in the artwork, like literally in the Alice in Wonderland stories. And then it also has usually quotes from the stories that tell you like a little bit more about what's going on. And then it also has I don't know if you'll be able to see it from here, but a little section called, sometimes it's longer than others, called Down the Rabbit Hole, where it explains how it relates to the reading in tarot, and what the card means. And it also gives you a cute list of keywords down below. It's great to just read through. Again, I usually suggest when you're reading to try to do things intuitively and not like look at the book, because then you kind of get a little too hung up on like, well, what does the book say, instead of like trusting what you think it is. But in a pinch, if you need to look things up. And I always suggest reading through the guidebook if it comes with one, before you even start reading any cards in the deck, just because it gives you kind of an idea of what the artist and the creator were like thinking when they created it and what their take is on things. But it's a fast, like you could just sit down and read this book. It's amazing. Literally, I'll find like, yeah, even for like, let me find okay, yeah. Hi, Figaro. Okay. That's my cat, Figaro. So even for like Queen of Wands, right, one of the minor arcana that we talked about, you can see there's a full picture, right? As well as, it's actually on the previous page, Through the Looking Glass, where it talks about what this card means in context of what's happening in the story, and some quotes. And then there's the Down the Rabbit Hole section where it talks about it in relationship to tarot, as well as a whole section of keywords. So like I said, probably the most in-depth guidebook that I have seen with any of my decks. So if anyone knows of other ones that are even more in-depth, please let me know, because I would love to get those decks. So one of my favorite parts of the book is that at the end there's a big section called spreads. And I know you're like, oh, great, they always come with spreads, which is true, but the spreads that they have in this are amazing. So they have suggestions like 1-card reading, 3-card reading, which we all know, right? You can do past, present, future. You can say like, what is the message for me for this day? They have a bunch listed that they suggest actually with the 3-card spread. Then they have like a choices spread. Some of them are very elaborate. Oh yeah, it's called Tarot in Wonderland. You probably can't see it. Tarot in Wonderland spread. So it's like very specific to the stories of Alice in Wonderland. And I've done a few of them. One of them is called Falling Down the Rabbit Hole. And you have 12 cards plus like some anchor cards that you pull. And it gives you a really, really long explanation of like what everything means. There's one called The Mad Tea Party, which has 5 cards plus another card that you choose. The White Rabbit's Stress, and they have different versions, so they're very, very fun. There's one called How to Play Croquet. So just like the most interesting things, and yeah, not just like this is what the card means, but there's so much more information in this. So I would really, really suggest checking it out. So that is Tarot in Wonderland. I hope you enjoyed going through that. And again, I would really, really suggest checking it out. Thank you for joining me today. As always, thank you, Figaro, for joining me. And I'll be back again soon with another video. You can find me on aceofcupsreadings.com. Bye, guys.